Welcome to Think Big with Michael Zellner, powered by Platinum Jewelers, located at 9387 Poplar Avenue in Germantown, Tennessee. It's right as you go through the light at Johnson Road on the right-hand side. Preston Hudson and the staff have an amazing selection of jewelry, great prices, take care of you every time you go in the store. You are joining us today for episode 133, part one of two, with our podcast guest, and his name is Bill Courtney. Bill is a motivational speaker and the CEO of Classic American Hardwoods, a lumber company that opened up its doors back in September of 2001 in Memphis. He graduated from the University of Mississippi in 1991 with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. With his extremely hard work and perseverance, the company has now grown internationally and has sales offices in Shanghai, China, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. Their annual sales are over $45 million a year. Even with all that going on, he has helped many kids throughout his hometown of Memphis and was featured in the 2011 Academy Award winning documentary Undefeated. It's an amazing film that goes through his career as a high school football coach at Manassas High School. He is also an author. His first book, Against the Grain, was published in 2014, and the foreword for the book was written by Phil Jackson, who is obviously a legendary NBA basketball coach with 11 rings, and won 6 with the Chicago Bulls and 5 with the LA Lakers. He's also has his own show. It's called An Army of Normal Folks podcast that I believe is in Apple's top 10 podcasts worldwide. And if that's correct, that is just pretty incredible. There's so much to talk about with him, about his life and career, that we'll be splitting this up into 2 parts. And I'm very excited to have him on today. Welcome to the show, Bill.
I need to fire my publicist and hire you. That was a pretty great intro. Thanks very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. As I said, there's so much to talk about with all the things that you've done, you're still doing. Bill, I'd love to start off with your childhood. What are a few memories of your early years in life, going to school in Memphis, that still make you smile today?
Wow, that made me smile. Playing sports, playing basketball for Zach Street. When he started a program at Mullins Methodist, and we were probably one of the top 2 or 3 teams in town, that makes me smile. A man named Ray Conder, coaching me in baseball. He was such a good man and meant a lot to me in my life. And then maybe in high school, I was telling you earlier, I lettered in 6 sports in high school. And so athletics were definitely my outlet from a lot of dysfunction that I actually grew up with. But what really makes me smile probably the most is my favorite teacher was Dale Flickinger, who was my math teacher. And I hurt my shoulder my freshman year. And Flick, as everybody called him, did the stats for the football team. And hanging around with him, talking to him, I found out that he played center in North Dakota for a high school team that I think lost 1 game in 4 years and won either 3 or 4 state championships. So, yeah. And I was like, so the math teacher's like a jock. And then I found out he, I think, was a concert pianist, and he played drums for a rock and roll band. And he also happened to be a master in chess, and he started a chess team that we were like, whatever, ended up having 125 kids from the school in the chess club, 6th grade through 12th grade. And because I was hurt, he said, come play chess. And I thought, I'm not playing chess. That's the geekiest thing I ever heard of in my life. And my senior year, I'm in Philadelphia playing in the national championships of chess.
Wow.
Wearing my letter jacket around a bunch of gooby guys. And frankly, those gooby guys are the people that I had some of my most fond memories with.
That's awesome.
And I found out that I was a gooby guy. And so truthfully, maybe what makes me smile is the experience that, you know, that offered me. So there's a lot that makes me smile, and it all has to do with really my mentors and the guys who invested in me that counteracted, my father leaving when I was 4 and having no relationship with me, and my mom's fourth husband shot at me down a hallway, and I had to dive out a window one night. And
Oh my God.
when the police showed up, I ran to a neighbor's. We called the cops. When the cops showed up, my mother was hiding in the attic, and there were bullet holes all over the house, and um, lots of dysfunction, lots of trauma. And so the things that make me smile, I guess, are the things I was involved in, shepherded by good men who were a counterbalance to the trauma I was going through as a young man through my life.
Amazing story. And that leads me to my next question is, how did growing up in Memphis, shape your values and perspective on life?
Well, I think, first of all, I'll never leave this town. I raised my family here. I grew up here. I built my business here, and I love this city for all its scars and difficulties and the things we're dealing with even today in our city. I think there's a certain soul of our town that is special, and I've always thought of Memphis as the biggest little town in the world, because there's almost nowhere you can go without running into somebody that you know.
True.
And I think that's special about our city. I think it's a highly philanthropic city. I think it's a city that the current fathers of the city, people like Pitt Hyde and Fred Smith and the Wilson family, Dr. West, Staley Cates, these are all people who've made enough money to move and live and go away and do whatever they want to do anywhere. But they continue to reside, live in, and invest in this town. And I think that's unique and special, and it's encouraging to me. This is the town that on April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King was shot in. And the riots and all that happened after that shut down downtown.
Yeah.
And so it's also the town that reconciled that and rebirthed, in the late 80s, and is still rebirthing. And there's just this steadfastness about our city that I think is unique and amazing and inspirational, and wants me to be part of it. So I guess what did I learn from growing up here is perseverance. You don't quit. You need to give back, and there's always a friendly face around the corner if you do things the right way.
Yep. I've always said there's so much more, as much negative as there is. And I don't even watch the news anymore, local or national, because I don't want to see all that stuff. There's way more positive in Memphis than there is negative, way more.
There is, and we have work to do. Our school system is broken.
Yeah.
Clearly, there's a problem with crime that I think is more than just a crime problem. I think it's a poverty issue, a joblessness issue. I think it's a parenting issue, and frankly, a morality issue. But there are people really working hard every day to work on those issues. Now, the people I know have not thrown up their hands and said, "What the hell, I'm moving." The
Right.
people I know are doubling down and digging in and trying to make it a better home. And there's a lot of work to be done, but for all of its scars, it really is a good place. And I'm here for the long haul.
Yeah, me too. Born and raised and have never left and never will.
Right.
Those challenges that you talked about that you went through with your family, in your childhood, I can't even imagine. I was very blessed to have, parents that were married for 48 years before my father passed away. So it's hard for me to see that, and it's amazing. But obviously that, they shaped you in a certain way. How did they shape your resilience that you have?
So Philip Spain was my football coach my freshman year. Raw boned, hard nosed guy, grew up in Milan, farming community, moved to Memphis to pursue coaching and teaching. And he was one of those no nonsense kind of characters that you feel like would be chewing on a blade of grass leaned up against a tractor one day, And he was a great football coach, but he was a better man and he was a good man. And he knew I was struggling. And my freshman year, he pulled me in his office and he said, from where I see it, you got a choice to make. He said, you can choose to be a victim of your circumstances, which people frankly would understand because you've got a lot of circumstances.
Sure.
He said, or you can dig your heels in the dirt, decide you're going to be a piece of granite that other people break themselves on. And he said, so you can choose to be a victim or you can choose to be stronger than the dysfunction surrounding you. And you asked me, how I found my resilience through men like that, through encouragement like that, through lessons like that. And although that doesn't serve much to counteract the whatever trauma you have in your life or give you guidance as to where to go from there, it at least gives you the recognition that all of us have a choice to make when we're hit in the face with life. Right. And we can choose to be victimized by it, whine about it, and succumb to it, or we can reject the chaos that leads to bad things and decide we're going to dig our heels in and be a rock that the idiots break themselves on. And that's a valuable lesson for me. And so I've always, since that day, chosen to see myself that way and act accordingly.
Awesome. You said, quote, every great thing that has been accomplished and is yet to be accomplished starts with the dream, unquote. That's one of many great quotes from your book, Against the Grain. Tell us what that means to you.
Well, if you can't see yourself being it, you will never become it. And so, I went to some private schools where everybody, I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment with a divorced mom and working really hard to put the Steinmart knockoff shoes on my feet when everybody around me was wearing the cool Bass Weegens, and
right.
And I can remember, feeling like a second-class citizen because I really was. And when you see around you all kinds of different stuff, and when I say stuff, I don't necessarily mean material things, but lifestyles and families that you don't have, you to better yourself in life, you have to see yourself better in life. You have to be able to dream that one day I can achieve what other people have, and one day I can have children that live a different life than I did, and one day maybe I could be a business owner, and one day maybe I could be a winning coach. So if you don't dream it, if you can't lay your head on a pillow at night and see yourself becoming something more elevated than you are, if you don't have the ability to think it, you never have a chance to even try to become it. And so I just think the United States of America was a dream.
Right.
But had someone back in those days not thought of an open, free society with freedom of speech and press and assembly, somebody hadn't dreamed that, this place wouldn't exist. If Martin Luther King and the many civil rights activists of the 60s hadn't dreamed of a day where a black person in our country was treated equally and fairly under the law, we might still be in the throes of overcoming issues that are destructive. If you can't dream of big, I mean, if we can't even dream that we can reduce the crime in Memphis, if we can't even dream that we can further grow downtown, if we can't even dream that we can reduce poverty and reduce joblessness in Memphis, if we can't even dream that our school system would become something where children are actually learning rather than this revolving door of crap that we have today, then it'll never get fixed. We have to dream it, so that's what I think. That's what I mean when I say everything starts with a dream.
Love it. After you graduated from high school in '86, you went to Ole Miss on a full 4-year academic excellence scholarship. You were really involved in the school there.
No, nobody says that. Did you talk to my mom or somebody? Unbelievable. But yes, I did. That's true.
You were so involved in the school, member of Sigma Nu, 2 academic honor organizations. You played soccer there in the soccer club for a few years, ended up being a feature writer with the school's newspaper, the Daily Mississippian. You won the first annual Chi Omega Service Award for outstanding community involvement. How the heck did you balance life, school, and all those things that I know had to take up and have fun and take up a ton of time? How did you balance it all?
Well, my senior year in high school, I won some award, and one of the trappings of that award was I got to go have lunch with Kimmons Wilson, the founder of Holiday Inns. And Kimmons Wilson's business cards were $100 million bills with his face on it. They were hilarious, and he gave them out everywhere. And for those maybe younger who aren't listening, every hotel we stay in today that is not a bed and breakfast or a 5-star hotel, all the Hampton Inns, the Marriotts, the Holiday Inns, Holiday Inn Expresses, Renaissance Inns, every one of those are born from Holiday Inn. Because prior to Holiday Inn, all you had were places that were independently owned, like the Peabody, and then one-stop shops like the Bates Motel. Everything else, that was it. Those were your choices. There weren't chains that when you pulled up to, whether you pulled up in Memphis or Birmingham or Los Angeles, you were always going to have a pool, a color TV, and everything was going to look the same. And that was Kimmons Wilson's idea. And he built that. He built that brand. And as a result, his family became extraordinarily wealthy, continued to invest in the hospitality business all over the country, are unbelievably philanthropic for our city. And the Wilson family remains in Memphis as well as their corporate offices, even after selling off Holiday Inns. So that's who Kimmons Wilson is, a really important figure in the history of our city and an ongoing legacy with his family. So anyway, I get to have lunch with this guy. And so I meet him at an FBO, which is a private airport right near Memphis International. And literally, not even exaggerating, we sat at this table and I could see through the window the Learjet sitting underneath a canopy that the minute lunch was over, he was going to walk out, get in, and fly off and go do something with. And so that gets your attention.
Yeah.
And we're just talking. He's asking about me, what my plans are, giving me little doses of advice in there. And at the end, I just said, I really dream of being something in this world that matters. And, how did you do it? What's your advice? And he looked at me and said, this is the last thing I'm going to tell you. And he said, work half the day. And I'm thinking, I'm good with that because this dude's got a Learjet out here. He's about to get on. He's got all his money. He's he's Kemmons Wilson. I'm in. And I looked at him, I said, cool. And he said, yeah, Bill, doesn't matter if you work the first 12 hours or the second 12 hours, just work out. And he looked at me and he said, the United States government tells a man that 8 hours a day is his required work day, and 40 hours a day is required work week. And that's what you should do to get your average pay. And he said, what makes you think you get to work average but be exceptional?
Love that.
And I said, I guess that does make sense. He said, if you want to be extra, work extra. If you want to be exceptional, work exceptional. And if the hands on a clock don't matter to you, then the rate of your ascension will be unlimited. And he got on his plane and flew away. And that has stuck with me, and I still work 12 hours a day today. I wake up at 5:30 or 5:30 every morning, and I'm not done until pretty much 6:30 every day. And the man was right. Now, the old adage of good old American hard work, pull yourself up your bootstraps, everything will work out. There's a whole lot of things that have to go right in your life besides just hard work. Right. But I can tell you, without hard work, none of those things will ever matter.
Did you watch him fly off? Did you wait and watch him fly off?
Oh, heck yeah. I'd never seen a Learjet before. I watched him get on it. I was like, bye-bye. And taxied out, gone. Had no idea where he was going, but I did.
That's really cool. What a great lunch. I can't even imagine how much, that changed your life.
There were two lunches I got to have my senior year in high school. It was that one and then one with Nick Clark Towers.
Okay.
And I found out what real humility surrounded by exceptional success looked like when I made Nick Clark's acquaintance. That man and his family, wildly successful, built at the time probably the premier building in our entire city. And to sit with a guy like that and then recognize this devout humility and the humbleness with which he and his family operated their business and used their holdings also was a real example to me of how you handle success. So Kemmons taught me a lot about how to attain success, and Nick Clark showed me a lot about how to handle it if you're fortunate enough to get it.
Right. I read where in the mid-90s that you sold cars for a few years in Memphis. What did you learn most about yourself during those few years?
More humility. So I was a dissertation away from my doctorate, and Lisa and I had 4 children in 4 years. And I was a teacher and a football coach making $17,000 a year with no insurance. We had 4 kids in 4 years, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the truth was, going to school and trying to become a developmental psychologist was no longer in the cards. And teaching school and coaching football as a profession was no longer in the cards because it just wasn't practical. You couldn't buy diapers and formula, much less pay rent.
Right.
And so I talked to some people, and they said, the purest form of business is car sales. And so I took a job actually selling fleets for the Dobbs organization, Dobbs Management, selling fleets of cars to companies that had company cars or the city for their fleet trucks. And was doing that and moderately successful. It was tough, low margin business. And then was offered an opportunity on the weekends to also do retail where there was a lot more money. And that is a job that you better be willing to work 12 hours a day and be present all the time to be able to be successful in. And what it really taught me was fundamentals of sales, finance, dealing with people, handling problem solving, and the importance of a nut. overall expenses. The Dobbs organization would have what's called a nut sheet, and it was a daily thing that came out, and it was, here's what it costs to operate today, and here's the revenue generated by sales. And if that revenue generated by sales exceeded that number, we were on the right path. If it didn't, we were falling behind and had to make up for it the next day. And it was really a daily monitoring of all the things we needed to do to be successful. And I still operate my business with those same principles today.
Amazing. How did you go from car sales to working with a lumber company when you got the job at JT Shannon Lumber? And that, I guess, you worked there.
Your research is ridiculous that you know these things. I sold the man some company trucks, and he said, you don't remind me of a normal car salesman. I said, well, I never really thought of myself as a car salesman, and told him a little bit about my background and about Lisa and the kids. And he said, would you consider selling lumber for a living? And I said, what's it pay? Because that's what it was all about for me.
Sure.
Formula and my wife. And he said, how about this? And I said, well, how about this? And he said, okay. And I put in my 2 weeks and got to lumber sales. I didn't know the difference in red oak and poplar. I didn't know the difference. I didn't know anything. I just knew that I was going to make $15,000 a year more doing that than I was doing what I was doing.
Right.
And went to work selling lumber.
That's awesome. One of the things that I've always talked about is personal responsibility. It's one of the biggest things in our city, our county, our country, wherever. People a lot of times just don't want to take personal responsibility for their own actions. You talked a lot about this in your life as you continue to speak to large groups of people. I'm sure you said back in 2021, quote, in these last few years, I've noticed two very interesting things about personal responsibility, and these things have happened consequentially. The first is that accountability to society standards had severely diminished, particularly among our leaders. And the second, which is more apparent now than more than ever, is that it has become increasingly less popular to even become that one has a duty to society standards, unquote. What does that mean to you? And how do you feel that there's some ways that, that can change today? Because it's such a different world than what we grew up in.
It goes back a little bit to what I was talking about in terms of when I made a cognitive decision to no longer be a victim of my circumstances and to reject chaos and forge a better life for myself than what I grew up seeing. And it's everything, everybody, and this is the world sucks. I mean, there are bad things that happen to people bad things happen to good people all day, every day. Good people deal with trauma and stress and difficulty all day, every day. Yeah. And so it's not about the bad things that happen to us. It's about our response to it. And it's not about the bad things that happen to the people in our orbit, in business, in our family, in whatever philanthropy we're involved in. It's about the collective response to the difficulties. And personal responsibility is when things happen that don't work for you, quit looking around for whose fault it is. Quit looking around for the things you got to do to cast blame so that you can exhibit your victimhood. Take responsibility for what you can control and change it. And don't be a sheep. Don't be led by all the stuff the world has to say about who you are or who someone else is or whatever. Take responsibility for what you can control and rest well at night knowing you're doing the best you can because you are being responsible for what you can control. Somehow, I believe that a lot of this pop psych current culture says, you know, if these things happen, it's these people's fault. If these things happen, it's these people's fault. If someone says, a great example is if someone says something that's counter to your political, racial, or faithful beliefs, that they automatically have to be your enemy and that you need to take everything they're saying personally.
Right.
I think that's a crock. I think we have a responsibility to shut our mouths, open our ears, and consider what someone who doesn't look like us, vote like us, or worship like us thinks, and then maybe engage in a non-threatening civil conversations about that stuff to learn. Now, I'm not saying that you give up on your fundamental tenets and values and belief systems.
Sure.
But you sure as heck are in a better position to articulate your own positions if you understand the positions of others. But you can't do that unless you take seriously your responsibility to listen and to and to drop the. I think we have a responsibility to quit being victims of everything that's said to us or done around us, and have a responsibility to actually consider another viewpoint, but do it in a civil, non-threatening way, because that's the only way growth can actually happen in your life or the lives of those around us. And we've gotten away from being able to have those. When I grew up, there used to be, it was said often that I may disagree vehemently with what you have to say, but I will defend with my life your right to say it.
Right.
That's gone, and we have a responsibility to get that back.
Yeah,
and you're not going to get it back by screaming what you believe at someone else. You're going to get it back by listening.
Yeah. You know, I grew up I sold Cutco knives when I was in college at Memphis State, and studied a lot of Zig Ziglar. And he always said that you shouldn't react, because people all just want to react to what someone says and, start yelling or whatever. You should respond. You think about it for a minute and respond. And we definitely have gotten away from that too.
Yeah, it's true. And Zig Ziglar had about 1,000 good ones like that, but you're absolutely right. Ironically enough, I sold waterless cookware door to door my freshman year in college to get enough money for fraternity dues. And that's exactly, I worked for the same company Zig Ziglar worked for. So I got to actually meet him at a sales conference one day. And holy crap, did everything that came out of that guy's mouth make a lot of sense to me back then.
Absolutely. He's awesome. Yeah. In the 5 years or so that you worked for JT Shannon, you obviously saw something you felt could change your life. Now, you were definitely thinking big. You took that big step, you going out on your own, starting your own company, Classic American Hardwoods in 2001, in September of 2001, which I can't even imagine starting a company during that time, right after 9/11. I don't know if you had started it before or after, or it doesn't matter.
10 days before.
Wow. I mean, first of all, how did that react? How did you handle that? And, what made you make such a huge and positive change in your life and just decide, man, I'm going for it?
I saw a niche opportunity in a very old established industry that I thought you could fill. But how I came up, and that when Lisa and I were first married, I was making $17,500 and she was working 3 jobs just to keep diapers and formula. And by that time, by my 5th year at Shannon, I'd become the vice president of sales, and we'd grown the company from 25 million to 100 million.
Wow.
And I was making more money than I thought I'd ever make. Lisa and I had bought what we thought was going to be our dream home, a really nice new home in Collierville with 5 bedrooms, 1 for each kid and us. And, in my mind, I'd arrived, I'd hit that dream, but I thought there was more, and I thought there was opportunity. And the owner of the company's children were also going into college. And I didn't want to be that 40-year-old guy that whose head was bouncing on the ceiling because nepotism would prohibit any further growth. And so I told Lisa what I was thinking. And Lisa, with 3 babies in the house, looked at me and said, you know, we were broke when I married you, and we can be broke again. If this is what you think, go for it.
Wow.
And so with that vote of confidence and my belief that there was a certain market that could be filled, we just kind of rolled the dice and went with it. And it was on a wing and a prayer, and we did not have much money. And then once we spent all the money that we had and put in equipment and we're operating literally day to day to make it through, the planes flew into the building. And now, look, I want to be very careful here. There's tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people in this country that the effect of 9/11 is, I can't even imagine. So I am in no way comparing trying to start a business 10 days before 9/11 happened to any of that. So I'm a piker compared to those guys. But the reality is the economy kind of shut down, and I'm trying to make money daily just to keep going. And I did think, well, that's it. You know what, Lisa, you're right. We've been broke before, and here we go.
Right.
And hook or crook, and with the grace of God, we made it through, and lots of long hours, and a couple of mashed digits, and learning a lot of stuff that I never thought I'd ever learn about equipment, machinery, and electrical stuff, and hydraulics, and everything else. We persevered and made it through, and some really good people working with me that also believed in my vision and bought in and sold out and worked their butts off too, to right alongside me is how we were able to go.
That's amazing. Yeah, I definitely got to surround yourself with those kind of people. It makes such a difference in your life and in your business.
Yeah, as long as they're all better and smarter than me at something, that's perfect. Because I had maintenance guys that were better at mechanics than me. I had a yard ops guy that was better at throughput than me. I had a buyer that was a better green lumber buyer than me. And I had some guys on forklifts and work in the yards that were better machine operators than me. I was a good salesman.
Yeah.
All of them were better than me at everything else. And frankly, I learned from them.
That's awesome. You had the opportunity back in 2014 after your book came out to be part of a live webcast with Pete Carroll, who had just, I believe, recently won the Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks.
You did way too much prep for this podcast.
Yogi Roth moderated a discussion with the two of you guys on success and leadership. What was that like for you? And did you learn anything from Coach Carroll?
Yeah, well, that was Lisa and I met Coach Carroll in LA at a Nike event, and that's how the relationship started. And he was kind enough to give us. I went with a couple of friends, actually the directors of Undefeated, and had sideline passes to a Seattle Seahawks, Atlanta Hawks playoff game, and hung out with him a little bit. So by the time that thing happened, we'd kind of
cool,
at least acquaintances. What I learned from Coach Carroll was always compete. You compete every day. You compete with yourself at breakfast. You compete at practice. You compete when you're doing film study. You compete on game day. You just compete. The man is all about always competing. And the second thing I learned from him is when you build that culture, coaching becomes pretty easy. And likewise, the stretch is, so does running a business, and so does everything else. I was at practice at the Seattle Seahawks practice facility, and I watched Richard Sherman, who at that time was the stud in the NFL in the secondary, outrun everybody to every drill, screaming at his teammates to quit being lazy. And then I watched the leaders of that team literally competing at practice for 2.5 straight hours, screaming. And I mean, they're the leaders. These guys are the millionaires. These guys could kind of cruise through practice if they wanted to and get away with it. But instead, they were competing for every minute, every second, every inch of practice and demanding that everybody around them competed. And I turned to Coach Carroll and I was like, this is amazing to see, what we see of Marshawn Lynch in the press is not what I'm watching right here. That guy competes on it. And he said, makes coaching pretty easy when the leaders of your team compete. And that's just kind of always compete. And I learned that from him.
Are you shopping for a new watch, an engagement ring, any kind of jewelry at all? What's up, Memphis? This is Jaren Jackson Jr. from the Grizzlies, encouraging you all to shop where I shop, Platinum Jewelers here in Memphis. Platinum Jewelers has a big selection of earrings, stockable rings, luxury watches, necklaces, bracelets, really whenever you need. 9387 Poplar next to Fresh Market in Germantown. So if you need anything jewelry related, go to my spot, Platinum Jewelers.
When your leaders are always competing, it kind of makes coaching and managing easy because they're carrying the mantle for you.
Absolutely. I mentioned Phil Jackson wrote the foreword to your book, Against the Grain. He had this to say about you, quote, his success serves as a moving example of what can happen when people in authority care about others, not just about winning the next game or securing the next client, unquote. To me, he's obviously saying, that you genuinely are a people person and you want to see them succeed, Bill. And, not just a little bit, but a ton. And you don't just wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to start caring about people. It doesn't work that way. This comes from, upbringing, having a huge heart, just being a good person. I would say for the most part that, people that you work with, the players that you've coached, which, we're going to talk more about for sure. If I had to take a good guess, they probably know that you're genuine, you're real, and you truly want what's best for their lives. Don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, the greatest measure of the success of a leader is the actions of the followers. And the actions of the followers are what make you either a failure or a success as a leader, whether you're a coach, a father, a husband, a business owner involved in some social aspect of philanthropy in your community. It's the actions of the followers define the success of the leader. Well, so then it follows that how do we make sure the actions of the followers make us successful as leaders? And people will do just about anything you ask them to do if they know that you care about them, that you listen to them, and that anything you ask them to do is to advance the vision of whatever organization you're in, that in turn advances them. So if you understand the people you seek to lead, if you understand their goals and their dreams, but also their inhibitions and their fears and their insecurities, and you work as a leader to help them advance their dreams and goals, and then work to remove the barriers that lead to insecurity and inhibitions and serve them, then the next time you ask them to do anything, they'll make a quick calculation in their head that says, every time he or she asks me to do something, I end up better for it.
Yeah.
So whether I fully understand it or not, I'm willing to act. I'm willing to act on what their instructions are because it always ends up serving me. So then, by definition, you are now leading, and it's servant leadership. And so, yes, you have to first understand that the greatest measure of your success as a leader are the actions of the followers. Are your children doing what they're supposed to be doing in school or whatever? Are your employees doing what they're supposed to do and hitting their numbers or not? Is your team playing, not always winning because talent wins, but they can sure put out their best effort and execute the plan to the best of their abilities. If you measure yourself by the actions of the followers and you win football games, sports, whatever, players win games, coaches win players. Salespeople win contracts. Sales managers win the salespeople. It goes on and on. And the way you win the salespeople is by genuinely listening, caring, serving, being a servant leader. And if you do that, people will follow your vision and they'll follow out your plans. And if they're doing that, then you can measure your success by the actions of the followers and look yourself in the mirror and know you're doing a pretty good job.
Absolutely. I love this quote of yours. You said, quote, "There's a fine line between naysayers and realists. A realist urges you to chase your dreams as long as they fall within the bounds of reason, while naysayers are filled with so much negativity that they don't think any dream can be fulfilled," unquote. Unfortunately, as we both know, especially after, over the last 20 years or so with social media, there's so much negativity around us, and how we react to it or even ignore it sometimes plays a huge role in our lives. As it relates to your life and what you've experienced, how does that quote relate to you and what you've seen and what you've heard?
Let's talk about the mayoral race that's going on right now in Memphis. A naysayer will say, our schools suck. We're on second and third generational poverty. There is a large percentage of the parents who are not engaged in the education of their children. There are a lot of teachers that work hard and want to do well with kids, but we have a top-heavy organization with lots of administration and lots of cost, oftentimes associated with unions who seem to be looking out for their own betterment rather than the actual education of kids. So a lot of that I would say is true, but an naysayer would say, you'll never fix it. A dreamer would say, or an optimist would say, there is a whole lot to overcome and it is not going to be easy, but we need to start looking at each issue pragmatically and trying to address step by step all of the things that plague our school system. And if we can carry that out and do it in a way that crosses racial and societal lines so that everybody understands that all we're trying to do is create a better environment for our kids and thusly the next generation of Memphians, then you can go to work. It's going to be hard, but you can do it. And so a naysayer wouldn't even try. A dreamer would put together a pragmatic plan, communicate that plan, find some consistency, build a team, and then step by step go to work on it. That's the difference in a dreamer and a naysayer.
Absolutely. You've been married to your wife, Lisa, for over 30 years now. You guys, just by the way you talk about it, you can tell you're not just husband and wife, you're teammates. Tell us a little bit about how you guys met and, what she's meant to your life.
We met in a cafeteria when I was coaching at Rosemark High School. Her aunt was the lunchroom lady, and she told me twice, I'd like you to be my niece. And I thought, I ain't dating the lunchroom lady's niece. I'm at the hairnet, Ruth Buzzy, the whole thing.
Right.
Well, one day I was back there and getting a cookie at lunchtime because they made these old hot chocolate chip cookies. And in the back door walks this beautiful woman. And I'm like, holy crap, who is that? And that's my niece you never want to date. And I'm like, oh, my bad. Took me months to get her to go out with me because she's gorgeous and I'm kind of a dumpy redheaded guy. And after our first date, we were never separated until the day we got married. And she is my compass. She has made me a better man. She is steadfast in her faith, her love for her children, and the difference in right and wrong. And I am the greatest blessing of my life was when she walked into it.
Awesome. That's awesome. Once again, I'd like to thank our sponsor for today's podcast, Platinum Jewelers. Bill, there's so many more things I want to talk to you about. We got to talk about Undefeated, talk about, a fine young man that I had the pleasure to have on my podcast last fall named Chavis Daniels, who you obviously had a humongous influence and changed his life and many more people too. Talk about your book more. Would you, like to come back on, for part 2 sometime in the next few months?
Yep. All you got to do is ask me, and we can talk about what we're doing now with the podcast, which I'd love to get into. But next one.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely. We'll talk about your podcast too, because that's on my list. I know you're super busy. I sincerely appreciate you coming on the podcast today. Once again, don't forget to check out Bill's podcast, an Army of Normal Folks podcast. It's available on Apple, iHeart, Spotify, Google, and Amazon Music. I look forward to having you on again soon. Appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.